Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 128, and the title of this episode is Terrorism, Distraction, Spying, and the Removal of the People's Rights. And let's get into the economic collapse news right away here, and we're going to go over to Greece. And what's happening in Greece is, as we know, they have debt upon debt upon debt. And to get more debt, what the European Eurozone wants them to do is to lay off more people, and it's a total of about 25,000 people, to take on this new debt. And what they're finding is that they have so much in back taxes that aren't collected, and it's around 60 billion euros, because what's happening is, as the employment rate continually goes up, those people who would have paid their taxes can't, because they're using that money to survive on. So what would you do? You got laid off. There is no hope for a job. Would you go and give your money to a collapsing government, or would you keep it to buy food and to survive with your family? Well, it looks like most of the people are keeping the money to survive, and they're not paying their taxes. And Greece has already spent their 75% of the bailout cash, and this goes on to say that Europe's taxpayers will unlikely be any more pleased to learn that as the end of June, a whopping 60 billion in past due taxes was owed by Greek businesses and individuals to the state. And this amount is 20% greater than the entire external cash handed over by the Troika to keep Greek banks afloat, and represents nearly 30% of imploding Greek GDP. So this is a no-win situation for the Greeks. The whole country is built on debt. The IMF was asking for investors and the Eurozone to write off a lot of their debt because it's unsustainable. It cannot continue this way, and it's impossible for the Greek people to get back up on their feet when they have to continually lay off people to get more debt. And that more debt that they receive, yes, it gives them cash in the short run, and they use it to pay off the existing debt, but there's no revenue in the country. When there's no revenue, they can't do anything. It's stagnant, and in a couple months they're going to ask, oh, guess what? We ran out of cash. We have no revenue. We need another bailout. And how many more do you give them until the entire country just implodes on itself? And that's what we're seeing now. And it's funny when I think back to last year when they said the Greek problem is fixed, don't worry about it, they got the bailout. And the mainstream media made a huge big deal that, oh, look, it's all fixed. And here we are today, a year later, and all the people that I listened to, the alternative media and everyone else, was saying that this is not a fix, it's the temporary thing. And here we are today seeing that this really isn't a fix. It's really temporary, it doesn't work, and Greece is completely imploding on itself. And now in Cyprus, I mean, really, we have the same type of things here. Now, Cyprus, they're easing their restrictions. Now, when you first hear this, it sounds like, oh, good, they're getting rid of their capital controls that have been over 100, 10-plus days now. No, that's not what they're doing. They're allowing people to put money into the banks. But when you put the money into the banks, you have capital controls. So who in their right mind would take their money and put them into the banks? Because the banks already showed when they get into trouble, they will take your money. So how and who is going to put money into these banks? And it goes on to say here that They have to put a fixed term deposit created with funds from cash provided that the amount to be deposited exceeds 5,000 euros, and the term of the new fixed term deposit is at least 3 months, and the new fixed term deposit cannot be terminated prior to its maturity. And on their 19th decree includes specific restrictions which remain unchanged, and they cannot exceed 300 euros daily per natural person, or 500 daily per legal person, and you can't take out that money. And that's the amount that you can take out. But it just boggles my mind for those who seen what has happened there. They've seen the banks take the people's money. Who in their right mind would actually put money into the banks? Now, Cyprus's unemployment has increased quite a bit. Annual unemployment increased by 31.7% in July in relation to the same month in July of 2012. Unemployment for July 2013 increased by 48,000 persons in comparison to 47,000 in the previous month, and increased 11,500 or so from last year. So unemployment continually rises in Cyprus. They are doing the same thing as Greece. Instead of them receiving the type of bailouts that Greece received, they just took the money from the people to bail out the banks. And they still won't let people get their money. They froze people's accounts. Their money is literally stuck in the banks, and they can't do anything about it. Even those people who would like to take their money out completely and leave the country, they can't do that either. And a lot of businesses have been suffering. People have been suffering. People have lost their jobs. People cannot find work. Unemployment is skyrocketing just like in Greece. They are having the same problems. And this template, this whole huge test of what they're doing, I mean, if you really look at it, they had two tests going on. They had Greece, which is the bailout test. They had Cyprus as the bail-in test. And both tests really failed. There's no good situation because it's still debt. You can't get away from it. Maybe if we get rid of debt, we can get away from it. Or maybe these countries should start over, wipe everything clean, start their own monetary system, and have nothing to do with the Western central banks, and let the governments actually print the money instead of the central bankers. Maybe that's a better solution for them. But, Cyprus has gone on now, and don't worry, all those people and unemployment going up, we're going to guarantee minimum income for all citizens. The government-insured guarantee that no one's income will fall below the level necessary to meet their most basic needs for any reason. And I got to see how this flies, because unemployment is running rampant over there. The people can't get their money, but they're going to make some guarantees here that everyone is going to get enough money to live on. And I don't know how this is going to really turn out, but it doesn't sound good. Now, here in America, the student loans now have the highest delinquency rate among all major consumer credit asset classes. And the balance of student loans is rising at about $110 billion per year. If you look around, even with President Obama and the government and all the commercials, everyone go back to school. If you go back to school, you can get a job. But you can't get a job because there are no jobs. So when you come out of school, you have no job. And all those students that are graduating college, who've coming out of college, who cannot find a job because the unemployment among youth is around 50% or so. They can't find anything in their field. They're not making what they thought they were going to make. What happens? You're not making that amount of money. You're not making any type of money. You have part-time jobs. You can't pay back your student loans. And some of these colleges are very expensive. If you have a student loan of $50,000, $80,000, $100,000, you need to make quite a bit of money to pay your loans off. And what we're seeing here in if we look at this in 2004, less people who are under 30 years old, it was a 20% delinquency of over 90 days. In 2008, it went up to 25%, and in 2013, it's up to 35%. And those people from 30 to 49, if we look back in 2004, it was around 20%. In 2008, it was around 26%. And in 2012, 2013, we are at already 33%. So you can see that these younger people below 30 are having a much harder time finding work and making enough money to pay the loans off. And when they start to you know when they can't pay any of this money off, and of course they have to because it affects your credit rating and it never goes away and you can't write it off or anything like that. So you always have this student loan stigma of not paying it always with you. And what's going to happen is the government holding all of these loans is increasing by 110 billion per year. We could see a collapse of the student loan bubble that's growing right now. Okay, let's move on here. Now, we know that we have the sequester, and President Obama and his administration always likes to show that how bad the sequester is. We're not getting the fireworks at the military bases, and we have to cut down on jobs, so they have to lay off people. And the worst thing that they have done is for the military hospitals, and they face serious financial problems in the wake of federal spending cuts. And I'm sorry, but those military people, I salute you. Anyone who serves their country, they have every right to receive medical treatment. Nothing should be ever cut for them. They're the ones should be the last place that we cut anything. The first place we should cut are the senators' salaries, are the representatives' salaries, are the president's salaries. Those are the people should get the first cut. They're our leaders. We're following them. They also should lead us into battle when we go to war. They should be there on the front lines, just like they did back in the old days. George Washington, he was right out there, right on the front lines. But this is ridiculous because if we look at what's going on here, they have no problem paying the staffers' medical bills. The ones that complain that when Obamacare goes into effect, the staffers, have to pay their own medical insurance, and they have to pick something from the Obamacare exchanges. And don't worry, because President Obama told us it was going to be so affordable and easy, and it's going to be great for everyone. Well, everyone's realizing that it's going to cost $5,000 for an individual and $11,000 for the family. But President Obama said, don't worry, we'll have the government, actually the taxpayers, pay for you, but we'll cut spending on the military hospitals. Oh, and let's see, we'll cut the spending on the military hospitals, but we'll give $500 million to the Syrian paid mercenaries and the police officers that left the Syrian army and went over to the rebel side. We'll pay their salaries. That makes sense, right? $500 million over there. And we'll pay for President Obama to go on vacation. We can spend millions and millions on that, but those people who fought for our freedom, those people who've given their lives, their limbs, and everything else, that's where we're going to cut? Seriously. Okay, let's move on. Now, J.C. Penney looks like it's so close to bankruptcy right now. It looks like a lot of their CEOs have left J.C. Penney. Things are not going well there, and the company is at risk of going into bankruptcy. And if retail sales are so great, this company should be booming right now. But we see all across the country with the amount of retail stores that are closing. This was in the USA Today news articles. Best Buy, Radio Shack, GameStop, Barnes and Noble, you name it. These stores are closing. Thousands of stores are closing. Retail people are being laid off. Just recently, retail sales are down, and we're seeing this really hit home at JCPenney, and they haven't been doing well for a long time. Okay, now regulators confirm that the mega banks are robbing your pension funds. Now, I believe if I remember correctly, Jim Rogers said they will be coming after your pensions because that's where a lot of money is still intact, and the central bankers and the government are eyeing your pensions and everyone's pensions. And what we're seeing today here, this goes on to say, in another case of conspiracy confirmed as a reality, U.S. regulators are now revealing various documents and call logs detailing initiatives by the world's megabanks to rig interest rates in order to take in millions at the expense of legitimate businesses and pension funds. And the people on Wall Street are on record in emails and phone calls discussing plans to make loads of cash on derivative trades by altering the ISDA fixed rates in their favor. And after all, they know, what would happen to the rates since they were the ones controlling it. And this whole thing is completely illegal and prohibited in the 2010 Dodd-Frank Act. And here are some of the financial institutions that are behind this: Bank of America, Barclays, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Royal Bank of Scotland, and other banks are also involved in this. And what I said a while ago, I know Jim Rogers said they're going to come after your pensions, but I wouldn't be surprised when they do come after the pensions that they just don't steal your money at this point. They actually give you treasury bonds in place of your pension fund money, so people still believe that their money is intact, and they have these treasury bonds in place of actual cash, just like in the bail-ins where the banks give the creditors, which used to be the depositors, but now they're called creditors. This is where they gave them bank stock in place of their cash. So we might see that actually occur. Now, China has opened up the Sri Lanka port, and this goes on to say Chinese-built ports open this week in Sri Lanka, giving Beijing a vital foothold on the world's busiest international shipping lane as it seeks to secure maritime supply routes. And as the next reserve currency, China is making deals all over the place. They are making deals with Russia. They are making deals with Australia. They're making deals with Iran, Syria, North Korea, Brazil. And they're making all these deals to bypass the U.S. dollar. And the Chinese are hoarding gold, and now they are making deals and acquiring shipping routes. And the Sri Lanka port wants to confirm and put everyone's minds to ease that in what they went on to say here, we will not allow any military base at our ports, nor will we allow them to be used for any strategic military purpose by anyone. Well, that is until war breaks out and they might have a change of mind. And Chinese are already there. They've already secured it. And I wouldn't be surprised if war broke out that all of a sudden that is a base. Now, China and Russia, we know that they are having drills. We know that they had a drill in off the coast of China near Japan, and now they're having additional anti-terror drills. They're in full swing. They go on to August 15th. This is a joint counter-terror exercises codenamed Peace Mission 2013, and they are working together. And we're seeing a lot more of these drills, not just by the United States government and South Korea, Japan, in the Mediterranean Sea. We're also seeing China and Russia, Russia with Armenia upgrading a base there, putting missiles in, and making out. Russia's also making deals with Cyprus to get a naval base and an airstrip and an air base over there. So we're seeing things play out, and all these countries are moving their military assets all over the place. The U.S. is also moving their military assets into the Philippines on a rotational basis. But again, when war breaks out, guess what happens? They already have the secure base there, and they have the ability to use it. And this goes on to say that China is becoming Russia's priority market at an accelerated rate as Moscow is shifting its economic priorities from Europe to Asia, boosting trade ties with the world's second largest economy. And this joint naval exercises in 2013 were the largest ever between the two states. Okay, let's move on here. Now, the U.S. allies do not support Syria negotiations. Well, I hate to say this, but Israel, U.S., the European nations, these are all Western central banks. They only want one thing, and they do not want peace. We've seen this before. They want to implement the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency into Syria and Iran. They have already done it in Iraq. They have already done it in Yemen. They have already done it in Saudi Arabia. They have already done it in Libya, Lebanon, and now they need to do this in Syria and Iran. The United States government central bankers are in the process of waging war to keep the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency and to keep all central banks protected and operating. And China, on the other hand, is doing it the opposite way. They are making deals so when they become the new reserve currency, they have all the ties to all the different countries worked out. And the U.S. and the Western central bankers are fighting to keep everything the way it is, and they're losing the battle. And this is why there won't be peace. There will be peace if Syria says, okay, we'll use the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency, come in, put up a central bank. Same thing goes with Iran. And what's funny is, Netanyahu came out and said, new president, same regime, so there'll be no changes there. But we also have to remember that no matter what propaganda Israel, U.S. government, central bankers use, it's continuously the same propaganda. I mean, right now we have 76 senators urging Obama to toughen Iran restrictions, and this is what's funny, okay? 76 U.S. senators have urged President Barack Obama to impose tougher sanctions on Iran, saying Washington must stress its military option even as new President Hassan Rouhani urges dialogue. Mr. President, we urge you to bring a renewed sense of urgency to the process. We need to understand quickly whether Tehran is at least ready to negotiate seriously on its nuclear program. Despite Iran's denial, the West is convinced, along with Israel, that Tehran is pursuing a nuclear bomb. Now, I wish these congressmen would really do their homework and really understand what is going on. This same propaganda has been going on for over 20 years. And I listed it here, and I've mentioned this before in my previous episodes. Even going beyond 1992, they have always said Iran is 3 to 5 years out creating a nuclear bomb. And I'll read a couple of them so everyone gets the point here. 1992, leaked copy of the Pentagon's defense strategy of the 1990s makes little reference to Iran despite laying out 7 scenarios for potential future conflict that stretch from Iraq to North Korea. In 1995, the New York Times conveys the fears of senior U.S. and Israeli officials that Iran is much closer producing a nuclear weapon that previously they didn't think they would have the technology to do. 1997, the Christian Science Monitor reports that the U.S. pressure on Iran's nuclear suppliers had forced Iran to adjust its suspected timetable for a bomb. Experts now say Iran is likely, they won't be able to create a bomb in the next 8 years or so. 1998, the New York Times said that Israel was less safe as a result of the launch, even though Israel alone in the Middle East possessed both nuclear weapon and the long-range missiles to drop from anywhere. 1998, the same week, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld reports to Congress that Iran could build an intercontinental ballistic missile that could hit the U.S. within 5 years. 2002, CIA warns of the danger from nuclear-tipped missiles, especially from Iran and North Korea. 2004, the Secretary of State of Colin Powell tells reporters that Iran had been working on technology to fit a nuclear warhead into a missile, and this goes on and on and on. Even President Bush in 2007 warns that a nuclear-armed Iran could lead to World War III. And this is, just recently Netanyahu said they're 3 to 5 years out. This has been going on for 20 plus years now. Where's their bomb? Why? Let's get serious here. This propaganda has been going on for over 20-something years. The only reason they continually do this is because during this time, they haven't been trading in the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency, and they haven't been able to put a central bank in Iran. That's it. That's all. Because think about it. If a country was going to create a bomb, like they said, and they were going to use it to create World War III, why are they waiting 25 years? Makes no sense. Okay, let's move on here. Iran to expand ties with Armenia. Now, you have to remember, Armenia already has deals with Russia. Armenia already has missiles placed on Armenia that can reach Syria just in case there's an attack. Russia is building up their base and funding their base to modernize their base in Armenia because they're placing their military assets and upgrading everything. Iran, to get around the sanctions, have bartered with Armenia. They've traded electrical power for gas, and now they're creating stronger and better ties. And this is just showing that to get around sanctions, and Russia, they're going to be doing more bartering, and Russia is protecting and overseeing and making sure that nothing happens. And this has been the real big problem with Israel and the U.S. government central bankers not going into Iran or Syria, is because Russia and China are backing these countries, and they have a problem with that. Okay, let's move on here. Now, let's take some more rights away from the American people. They've chipping away at the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Second Amendment, and now, again, this is back up saying that senators ponder if blockers deserve First Amendment protection. I hate to say it, but the First Amendment has no bearing on if you're a blogger or anything like that. What they're trying to do is they want their controlled corporate mainstream media declared as the official press because they can control that. Anyone else doesn't get the First Amendment right to speak out against their government. Think about that for a sec. This goes on to say, as the U.S. Senate continues to debate a national law to protect journalists from protecting their sources, 2 senators believe unpaid bloggers and websites like WikiLeaks shouldn't get extended First Amendment protections. However, in today's world, the definition of the word journalist means different things to different people. And two powerful senators, Dianne Feinstein and Richard Durbin, say journalists only should enjoy extended First Amendment protection if they work for traditional media outlets on a paid basis. Well, I'm sorry. The First Amendment is given to every single person. It allows them to talk out freely against their government. And guess what? Unpaid or paid bloggers, it makes no difference. It's every person is allowed these rights. And again, the government is having a problem. The central bankers have control of the creation of money. They have control of the flow of information in the mainstream media up until the internet. This is where the big problem is. The birth of the internet gave way to alternative media. This alternative media is gaining steam because they question and ask questions about everything that goes on. They take pictures. They have people on the street taking pictures. And when the government, 5 corporately owned mainstream media outlets have a different story, and the alternative media makes a little bit more sense of what the story is, the government central bankers don't like this. So what do they need to do? They need to control the flow of information. So how do you control the flow of information? You pass laws. You have CISPA, which is pending in the Senate. You have President Obama create executive orders that he is allowed to control all communications, which include the internet, during an emergency. So, what is an emergency? It could be anything that he wants it to be. And this is how they're going to get around controlling everything. And they're waiting for an event to get CISPA passed. Just like the Patriot Act was passed, and the NSA used the Patriot Act to spy on all of Americans. And those congressmen who created the Patriot Act said, wait, that wasn't what it was meant for. But guess what? It gave them the leeway to spy on everyone. CISPA will give them the leeway to control the internet. And what's funny, this article goes on to say, Feinstein also reportedly said that a bill shouldn't apply to WikiLeaks or a 17-year-old who drops out of high school, buys a website for $5, and starts a blog. Well, I'm sorry. An 18-year-old, a 20-year-old, they're all Americans. They all have the same freedoms. They all have the same rights, and they have the right to talk out against their government. The end. And all they're trying to do here right now is chip away at all the rights of every single person. Okay, let's move on here. Now, talking about rights and Constitution, the DHS has created Constitution-free zones, and it's borders all around the U.S., and it's from the ocean inward, and it's about 100 miles, and it affects about 197 million people or so. And it's funny, if you look on the map, the whole state of Florida is in a constitutional free zone, where, this goes on to say, I'll just read this and I'll comment on it. DHS has literally created an imaginary border within the United States that engulfs 100 miles from every single end of the nation. With this fabricated border, the DHS can search your electronic belongings for no reason. They don't need suspicion. They don't need, a reason to do this. They can just go ahead and search you because you're under the constitutional free zone. But I hate to burst the bubble of the DHS. There's no such thing as a constitutional free zone. If you are an American citizen, if you're inside America, you have the rights of the Constitution. And you have the right, which is, you're born with these rights, of course, and the Fourth Amendment says that you're not allowed to search anyone, seize anything, and they are violating the Fourth Amendment. And if we look at the Supreme Court case, Marbury versus Madison. I'll just read a little brief thing here. Thus, the particular phraseology of the Constitution of the United States confirms and strengthens the principle, supposed to be essential to all written constitutions, that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and that the courts, as well as other departments, are bound by that instrument. So what it's saying is anything that is repugnant and against the Constitution is null and void. Well, guess what? The constitutional free zones are repugnant to the Constitution. This is completely null and void. They have no right to do any of this, of what they're doing. But then again, they are getting ready for the economic collapse that is coming, and the DHS was not put in place to protect the people. The DHS has been put in place to control the people before, during, and after the economic collapse, when everything completely falls apart and the president declares martial law and they send out the DHS troops to get those people where they have been creating lists with their fusion centers, NSA, creating lists of those people that will pose a problem during this time. Okay, let's move on here. Now, consumers, they don't really feel any effects of the cyber attacks that have been happening on the banks. Yeah, they've had some downtime and things like that. And there was a survey done, because the government needs to get, and the American the central bankers need to get a feel of how everyone thinks about cyber attacks, and are they aware of them. So what they've done is they created a survey, and this survey goes on to say here, they asked if people were aware of recent cyber attacks on financial institutions and having such attacks defined and explained to them. Almost half of U.S. consumers, 45%, said yes, and 42% said no. But asked if they had been affected, 94% of those who were aware of the attack said no. So a very small segment of the population, less than 3%, said they had been directly affected by DDoS incidents. That's the denial of service attacks. And those who say they have been affected, 37% they were unable to access account information, and 33% said they couldn't access their bank's online service. The majority of consumers surveyed, 57%, do believe cyber attacks put their money at risk, and that's all they wanted from this constant, continuous news going back a year and a half now of people getting hit by cyber attacks. DHS, Panetta saying that cyber attacks can also hit the infrastructure. Cyber attacks are going to be used as the main event, the perfect doomsday false flag type of scenario. Now, this doesn't mean that we'll see other cyber attacks before this that create situations where they need to close the banks and do some type of bail-in because these cyber attacks caused an economic collapse. So this is if they can't get everything completely done. What I mean by that is that if they cannot get the war started in Syria to cover the economic collapse, if they cannot get the gun laws passed, the gun bill, the UN Arms Treaty, if they can't take away the rest of the rights of the people, they will use the cyber attacks, the main one, the doomsday one, as their last-ditch effort. And what I mean by that is if all else fails, they will create a cyber attack that will hit the power grid, the infrastructure, and take down electrical power. This, I do believe, was tested in 2003 when the Eastern Seaboard lost their power. They were seeing if they were able to do this type of work, and this is why that went out. I do believe that was a test. And this, when they do hit the power grid, and CNN on, I forgot which reporter it was, I showed a video of CNN showing that a generator being hit by a cyber attack, and it smoked and it exploded and the power went out and it stalled it. Panetta, DHS, a lot of other agencies have also said if a cyber attack hit the power grid, we would lose power for weeks or months. What will this enable them to do? It will allow them to declare martial law, because people will be rioting, trying to get food, trying to protect their homes. It will be dark all the time. People are not prepared for this. So they will allow them to declare martial law. It will allow them to confiscate weapons. It will allow them to blame the economic collapse on another country. It will allow them to say, since this other country did this to us, we have to go to war, and this will be used as their last ditch effort, and that's what these cyber attacks have been built up for. Okay, talking about false flags, we know now that the government of the U.S. has sent out that Al Qaeda is a huge threat here in the Middle East, and they had to close down all the embassies. And I created a map of all the embassies that they had to close, and all these embassies now are closed through August 10th. And when you look at the map, it's really all the embassies surrounding Iran and Syria, which is very interesting. And during this time, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some type of airstrike or something happen during this time, either by Israel or the U.S. government, or Israel and the U.S. government combined, because I find it very interesting that this is where it's being held. But we are going to see some type of false flag event. Senator Chambliss, saying that this is the most serious threat that I have ever seen in the last several years. I mean, they were really playing this up big time. They're going through, all the chatter that they received, and like I said, this is to allow the NSA to prove why they're spying on all American people. And you have to remember, this is in the wake of Amash introducing the bill to get rid of the NSA's ability to spy on all Americans. Even though it was shot down, it's being reintroduced. And they believe it's going to pass this time. So before this happens, they need to show why the NSA and why this program is worthwhile, and why they need to do it. And actually, they need more of your rights taken away to spy on you even more. And this is the case they're really trying to bring home here. And this goes on to say that, that they're paying very, very close to the terrorist chatter, indicating that something bad is about to happen somewhere overseas. Chambliss said that some of the terrorist plotting was picked up by controversial government surveillance programs, hint, hint. If we did not have these programs, hint, hint, then we will simply wouldn't be able to listen on the bad guys. And I will say that it's the 702 program that has allowed us to pick up this chatter. That's the program that allows us to listen overseas, not on domestic soil, but overseas, and that's where all the planning is taking place. We think that's where the activity is planned for. So yes, these programs, even though they're controversial, this is a good indication of why they're so important. And Peter King, who is head of the DHS committee, he goes on to say, while an attack is most likely to happen in the Middle East, it could be in Europe, it could be in the United States. Representative Peter King said. A New York Republican who serves on both the House Intelligence and Homeland Security said this week it could be a series of combined attacks. This threat was so specific as to how enormous it was going to be, and also certain dates were given. So they don't know where it could be, and they're just scaring everyone, and they want everyone to know how important it is that we spy on everyone all over the place, because look at the information that we're getting from this. It's amazing. And how we know where all this is going to happen and where it's all going to be. But my question is, if they have all of this information and they're out there blurting it out where they think it's Yemen and all this, and in one of the previous reports they didn't want to tip off Al-Qaeda, but aren't they tipping them off with all this information going out there? And wait, isn't Al-Qaeda a paid mercenaries by the CIA? Aren't we paying them in Syria? Not us, but the U.S. government. Aren't they paying them in Syria to fight the war over there? So it's amazing to me how people are so ridiculously mesmerized by what the mainstream media is putting out there, and how so easily they're convinced that the United States has a handle on this. But if you go to the DHS, and this is the Peter King, he's head of the Homeland Security Committee, and they're picking up all this chatter. But if you go to, they don't know where the attacks are going to be. It could be on the American soil. But if you go to DHS terrorist warning system, it's always blank. They have nothing there. Wouldn't you think it would show up there? Interesting. But in every terrorist happening or whatever, it is always blank. Go take a link. Go take a look. I have a link on the x22report.com site. It brings you over to the DHS site, and you'll see there are no warnings. There's nothing. It's blank. But because of all this, Hengel in the Middle East is beefing up the warships over there and putting them right outside Yemen, making sure that they are ready. They are ready for this false flag event. This terrorist attack that they captured all the chatter. And I believe that something will happen during this period, and they will allow something to happen, but then they'll say that they stopped the rest of it from happening. But we'll still have to see how this plays out and how they're going to spin this to show the American people and the world how important it is that the NSA and all these agencies spy on everybody. And I just wanted to go back briefly to one other important story that I believe is very important. The Boston bombing. They are saying now that they found evidence that he had reading material that advocated white supremacy and conspiracy theories. They found literature, and he also used it to create the bombs, and something very important that I thought it was very interesting. And I'll just read this one section here. The 26-year-old who was killed in a shootout with police after bombs killed 3 people during the Boston Marathon in April read up on a number of conspiracy theories and the rape of our gun rights. When this first happened, this, I believe, was really supposed to be about the gun rights of the people, because the bomb was made with gunpowder. At the same exact time, the gun bill was in the Senate being voted on the same day. And I noticed how they're using the rape of our gun rights, conspiracy theories, white supremacy, and I believe this is what they were trying to go for. But what happened was there were too many pictures, there were too many things going on that they didn't expect. Just like that operational of the black van and the other people, the bag didn't match the bag that was left, and things got out of hand. They lost control of it, and then we had an explosion down at the fertilizer plant, which took everyone's eyes off the Boston bombing so they can redo the story there, and then all eyes went back on the Boston bombing, and we had a whole new story about Al-Qaeda and things like that, and the gun bill got shot down at that point. But this was a definite play to get this going. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.